At 9:40 p.m. on February 15, 1898, the peace of Havana Harbor was shattered. The USS Maine, an armored cruiser representing American power, erupted in a catastrophic explosion. Over 260 sailors, the vast majority of her crew, were killed instantly as the forward third of the warship folded in on itself. The public cry was immediate. "Remember the Maine! To hell with Spain!" The explosion was declared an act of war, the work of a Spanish mine. But from the moment the first divers surveyed the mangled wreckage, the physical evidence told a different story. The ship's bottom plates were bent outward, not inward, as an external mine would have caused. This single, damning piece of forensic evidence suggests the Maine was not murdered, but that it died by its own hand. It was a catalyst for war, built on a forensic lie. This is the story of the USS Maine and the engineering flaw that sealed its fate. We will dissect how it was designed and why it failed. To understand the Maine's destruction, we must first understand the world she sailed in. The year 1898 was the peak of new imperialism. The great powers were engaged in a global scramble for territory, and the United States was eager to join the ranks of empire. The tinderbox was Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, which was fighting a brutal war of independence against its colonial master, Spain. American yellow journalism, led by newspaper magnates William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, fanned the flames of war. They published sensational, often fabricated stories of Spanish atrocities, whipping the American public into a pro-war frenzy. Spain was painted as a tyrannical, decaying empire, and America as the righteous liberator. Into this powder keg sailed the USS Maine. She was not a first-rate battleship, but a new, fast, second-class battleship, often designated as an armored cruiser. She was a symbol of the new American Steel Navy, a tool of gunboat diplomacy. Her mission to Havana in January 1898 was officially a friendly visit to protect American citizens and property. But everyone understood its true purpose. It was a veiled threat, a steel fist in a diplomatic glove. The Maine sat at anchor in Havana Harbor for 3 weeks, a visible projection of American power in a Spanish port. The tension was palpable. Spanish officers felt insulted. Cuban rebels saw a potential and dangerous ally. The ship was an object of intense suspicion. When she exploded, the political machinery was already primed for war. The American public and its press didn't want a complex engineering investigation. They wanted a villain. Spain was the obvious culprit, and the cry, "Remember the Maine," became a political justification, not a forensic conclusion. This immense political pressure demanded a simple, external causa mine, and it led the first naval court of inquiry to overlook the fatal secret hidden deep within the Maine's own hull. The USS Maine was a vessel of compromise, a machine built in a transitional era. She was one of America's first steel battleships, yet her design was already being eclipsed. She was not a true pre-dreadnought. Her main armament was mixed, with 10-inch guns in 2 offset turrets and a secondary battery of 6-inch guns. This hybrid design reflected a navy still experimenting with the future of sea power. But the Maine's most significant features were not her guns. They were her guts. Like all ships of her day, she was a coal-powered steamship. Her beating heart was a set of vertical triple-expansion steam engines, fed by 8 single-ended Scotch boilers. To fuel these boilers, she carried over 800 tons of bituminous or soft coal. Here, in this 3D cross-section of the ship's forward hull, we can see how this coal was stored. It was packed into bunkers that lined the hull, acting as an additional, though unintentional, layer of protection. But this coal had a well-known and dangerous property: spontaneous combustion. Bituminous coal, especially when stored in large, poorly ventilated piles, can slowly oxidize. This generates heat, which, if not dissipated, builds relentlessly. This was a common problem on warships. Bunker fires were a constant, nagging threat, often smoldering for days. The Maine's second critical component was her ammunition. Her magazines were filled with shells and, more importantly, the propellant: brown-black powder. This was not the stable, modern smokeless powder, or cordite, that would soon become standard. This older powder was notoriously unstable. It was highly sensitive to shock, and most critically, to heat. Naval regulations at the time were clear. These magazines had to be kept cool and isolated from heat sources. Now, let us bring our forensic analysis to the Maine's blueprints. When we overlay the ship's coal bunker plan with the ammunition storage plan, the fatal flaw becomes immediately, shockingly apparent. Here, in the forward section, is the 6-inch reserve magazine. And right here, sharing a single, uninsulated steel bulkhead, is coal bunker A16. This is not a minor oversight. It is a catastrophic design failure. A magazine filled with heat-sensitive explosives was placed directly adjacent to a bunker filled with material known to spontaneously ignite. A single 516-inch steel plate was all that separated a potential inferno from a high-explosive payload. The 1898 inquiry noted that the magazines were inspected daily and their temperatures logged. But they missed the point. They were logging the air temperature. The real danger was conductive heat, traveling directly from a smoldering hotspot in bunker A16 through that common bulkhead, and silently, invisibly, cooking the brown powder on the other side. The Maine was a time bomb, designed and built by her own Navy. All it needed was time. The night of February 15th was hot and still. The Maine sat in the dark water, her crew mostly asleep. But deep within her hull, in bunker A16, a chemical process that had been building for weeks was reaching its lethal conclusion. A compressed pile of bituminous coal, starved of ventilation, had developed a hotspot. It began to smolder, its temperature climbing past 150 degrees Celsius. This was not an open fire. It was an insidious, conductive heat, and it was pressing directly against the 516-inch uninsulated steel bulkhead separating it from the 6-inch reserve magazine. Our forensic analysis, based on Admiral Rickover's 1976 review, shows what happened next. That steel plate became a giant heating element. On the other side, tins of brown-black powder stacked against the bulkhead for storage began to cook. The powder's unstable chemical compounds started to break down. At approximately 9:40 p.m., a single container of powder reached its auto-ignition temperature. It flashed. This was the first explosion. It was a low-order detonation, likely confined to the 6-inch reserve magazine, but it was the trigger. This initial blast tore through the forward section of the ship, ripping through internal walls and hatches. Its pressure wave and superheated flame front, traveling at hundreds of meters per second, were aimed like a cannon at the Maine's primary arsenal. Here, in this 3D recreation of the ship's forward third, we see the catastrophic chain reaction. The blast from the reserve magazine instantly reached the Maine's 6-inch and 10-inch magazines. These were the ship's primary ammunition stores, containing tons of powder. The result was a simultaneous, sympathetic detonation of the Maine's entire forward arsenal. This was the explosion that was heard and felt across Havana. This was the event that killed 260 men. The force was incomprehensible, estimated at over 100,000 pounds of explosives. Because this detonation was internal, the force expanded in all directions. It blew upward, ripping the topside decks apart and hurling men and machinery into the night air. But crucially, it also blew downward. The massive pressure waves slammed into the ship's double-bottom hull, acting like a hydraulic ram. It tore the keel apart and bent the ship's bottom plating outward, the key forensic clue that the 1898 inquiry missed. An external mine, detonating beneath the ship, would have driven these plates inward, creating a dished crater. The evidence from the wreckage, later confirmed when the ship was raised in 1911, was irrefutable. The ship was blown apart from the inside. The forward third of the 324-foot ship was obliterated. The blast was so powerful it lifted the entire bow structure, which then collapsed back on the sinking wreckage, folding the ship's spine into the inverted V shape seen in the famous photographs. The Maine, her own guns and powder turned against her by a smoldering fire and a fatal design flaw, sank in less than 20 minutes, her bow resting on the harbor mud. The 1898 U.S. Navy Court of Inquiry, operating under immense political pressure and without the wreckage being fully raised, concluded the Maine was destroyed by an external mine. This was the answer America wanted, and it provided the casus belli for the Spanish-American War. The evidence of the outward bent hull plates was ignored, dismissed as an anomaly. It would take 78 years for a proper forensic engineering review to deliver the truth. In 1976, Admiral Hyman Rickover, the father of the nuclear navy, applied modern engineering principles to the original evidence, including the 1911 photographs from when the Maine's cofferdam was built. His conclusion was definitive. Rickover's team proved that a spontaneous combustion fire in bunker A-16 was not only possible, but probable. Their analysis confirmed that the heat from such a fire, transferred through the uninsulated bulkhead, was sufficient to auto-ignite the brown powder in the adjacent reserve magazine. The damage seen in the wreckage was, in his words, inconsistent with the external mine theory, but characteristic of a large internal explosion. Here, our analysis must identify the tragic flaw. It was not a single, faulty part, but a systemic design philosophy. The Maine's flaw was the common bulkhead, the placement of a highly unstable explosive magazine directly against a poorly ventilated bunker filled with a self-igniting fuel. This was a known risk in naval architecture, but it was accepted in an era of rapid technological transition. A compromise made in the quest for firepower and range. The Maine was not the first ship to suffer this fate, but she would be the most famous. Her destruction was an engineering accident waiting to happen, a fatal chain reaction set in motion by her own designers. The explosion of the USS Maine was a tragedy of physics, but the war it started was a product of political will. The sea is an unforgiving proving ground. It finds every flaw, every compromise, every shortcut. The Maine lies in deep water off the coast of Cuba, but her true resting place is in the lessons of history, a memorial to over 260 men, and a stark reminder that the most dangerous enemy can often be a flaw in the design.